now we go on to the beginning. We're going to have 2 sessions, and this is the first of those sessions, on some of the documents, no, actually all of the documents in what is called the Apocrypha. In this first one, we begin with 2 books named the same thing, sort of. First Esdras and Second Esdras. Just as in the Hebrew Bible itself, there are books that have more than one name. For instance, Ecclesiastes is also called Koheleth. It's the same book. It's in wisdom literature. It's the one that was made popular by the Byrds. Geez, how many years ago? Turn to everything. There is a season. That's Ecclesiastes, and it has 2 names. It gets even more complex when we get to the Apocrypha. So there's a book called First Esdras, which is also called Esdras A or Third Esdras. Although I think if you have a Bible that says the Bible with the Apocrypha, I believe in virtually all of those, if not in every one, it's called First Esdras. And it is pretty much a rewriting or reconsideration of biblical books. In particular, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and this is the period that it purports. So the writer is acting as if he, or it's probably a he, was living sometime in the 7th through the 6th century, but in fact it was compiled in the 3rd century. Now, it has a great deal to say about a particular Passover, Josiah's Passover, which goes back to 622, and a celebratory day, the time of Ezra, which is, excuse me, a bit later, 5th century. And those are important because Josiah, of course, is the great king. He doesn't have a reputation that David does, but he's a great reformer king. He was one of the good kings of Israel. By the time we get to Ezra, even though they are not in terms of age, Josiah and Ezra are not that far apart. They're not hundreds and hundreds of years apart. Still, momentous stuff happened, like the exile happened. So Jews were taken out of Jerusalem or killed in Jerusalem, and only some returned. Among them was Ezra. So the fact that he is able in his own country to celebrate a major festival is a big deal. And that's how the book is constructed, around these 2 great feasts. It's a feel-good kind of story. After the turmoil of the exile, it's like, let's celebrate something like a return to the good old days. It's much more, when you put it side by side with the books that it's reflecting upon, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah, it has a much more positive tone than those. There are some of the Hellenistic values that I talked about before that have crept into this book. Then Second Esdras has within it 3 separate writings that come from slightly different periods, although they all act as if they're written by one person in one period. And to make matters even more confusing, they're written by both Jews. Some sections are written by Jews and other sections are written by Christians. And the Christian part, of course, talks about inequities in Judaism, whereas the Jewish part is more about, almost like the Book of Lamentations in the Bible itself. It is reflecting in anguished ways about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. It refers to Rome as a new kind of Babylon. And its central issue, and this is why I call it Job Revivus, is theodicy. That is, it calls into question the justice of God. How can these, if God is good and just, how can these terrible things have happened to us? And the person who's asking the question, like Job, is brave enough to say this stuff out loud. Unlike Job, whose so-called friends try to argue him into their understanding of orthodoxy, it's an angel who appears as the challenger to the speaker and finally converts the speaker into understanding that he had it wrong, that the truth, that there is a thing called theodicy, that it does seem on occasion that God has gone out to lunch or something, leaving the people in dire need, but that it's all going to be taken care of in the end. The answer to theodicy is apocalyptic. That is to say, at the end of time, at death, at individual death on the one hand, the end of time on the other, the just are going to be rewarded and the wicked will be punished. Meanwhile, roiled into these separate writings are the growing tensions between the Jewish community and the nascent Christian community, who did not separate as completely different constituent bodies until the end of the first century. Prior to that period, we were Christian Jews with a different slant on religion than Jerusalem Jews or Essene Jews or other Jews of the first century. We were just different. It's at the end of the century that we begin to understand that we really are different enough to separate and understand different norms, different understandings of God, and of course for Christians, who Jesus is.